Why, hello, my loves, and welcome back to Spook Manor. I know you're usually here for fictional stories that are often of actual urban legends and sometimes have historical reference. However, this week, I have a very special gift for you. A spooky camping story, and one that happened to yours truly. Would you care to join me on this little adventure? Shall we begin? So, it was mid-September, and my lover and I decided to go up and visit some friends that we have who live in the mountains. They have this gorgeous cabin up there with these absolutely spectacular views of the mountain range and this wraparound porch that was just incredible. I mean, it just absolutely hugged the cabin, and it was stunning. And we had a wonderful time. I know you know who you are, and you're probably watching this, so hi. So anyway, while we were up there, before we left, they said, hey, we have this huge freezer that we want to get rid of because we need the space. It's in perfect working order, and do you all want it? So we were like, heck yeah, we could always use another freezer. And so we strapped it into the back of the truck, and we were like ready to just rock and roll. So as we left, we were kind of looking for a place to stay that night because we knew that there was no way we were going to be able to make it back home in time. We were going to definitely have to overnight. And kind of thought, a hotel wouldn't really be the best idea because, someone could steal the freezer, and it just wasn't worth the trouble. Plus, my love and I are huge nature people. Like kayaking, camping, hiking, you name it. If we can be outdoors in the sunshine, that's the happiest that we can be. So as we were driving back, I was looking on my phone for some place for us to stay. And I found this website that was of this campground that was featuring all these old buses, these vintage buses that you could stay in, which I love. I love all that nostalgic vintage style stuff. I'm just a fanatic about that. So it was already just right up my alley. Plus, it was going down below freezing at night, and so when it had a big sign on there that said heated bus with giant shower, I'm like, oh, we're doing this. So I went ahead and booked the campsite, and the host was really nice. Immediately they sent me the directions and how to get there, and it started with go past this specific billboard and turn at the rock pile. And I'm like, okay, that sounds wonderful. So we get to the rock pile, and it turns out that it was this massive, construction dump site. There were huge pieces of concrete and, kind of junk strewn around. There was, insulation, clothing, just all kinds of junk. It was really shocking. But the good news was that there was so much nature around. There were all these trees. It was really thick forest. And it appeared like somebody was making the best of a bad property, which I'm totally supportive of. And it could use a little cleanup. But anyway, I'm pretty tough, and I like to rough it. So I was like, let's just check it out. So we're at the top of the hill by the rock pile, and we can look down and see that there's 3 or 4 other buses down there. So these different buses were all blocked from each other by these construction dump piles and woodland, heavy woodland. And so they told us to turn pretty much right away and go all the way down the gravel road to the end where our bus would be. So we get down there, and I'm like, as soon as we pulled in, I laughed to myself, and I sent my friend a text. I was like, I watch way too much true crime. So it was a little bit freaky, to say the least. And when we got out, we were right below the highway, so we could hear all of that highway traffic. And I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know how I'm going to be able to sleep with all that noise happening. But again, I'm tough. I'm like, hey, I can handle just about anything. So we kind of walked by the fire pit area, and it was really rusted. Like, there was no way we were going to be able to cook on that grill. Like, it was way rusted through. Plus, the fire pit was pretty rusted, and the chairs were rusted, and the cushions were like really wet and moldy. So we were like, ooh. I wanted to see inside, though. I had to totally look. I couldn't resist.
It's a nice rig you got there.
So we go in there, and I look around, and it is heated. It's like warm in there, sort of warm in there. And like, the bed doesn't look so bad. There were definitely rust spots in the bus around, and there were definitely a lot of holes and things like that. I was like, oh, well, I couldn't really figure out how they kept the critters out of there, but I mean, it's camping. So I'm trying to keep warm inside the bus, and my lover, he is like the security king. Like, he makes sure everything is safe. He always has my back. I appreciate and love him so much for that. I'm so grateful to always be so safe. And he's like doing this walk around the outside. And so I'm sitting there, and after a while, I'm like, oh, I feel really awful. Like, I just started to feel kind of sick and dizzy, and I'm like, this isn't like me. I don't get sick. And so he came back in and was like, okay, well, we need to talk about this. And I was like, yeah, I feel awful. I can't figure it out. And so I can't smell. It's a genetic disorder that I have. It's like smell blindness is what it's called. So I had no idea what was going on. And he told me, he said, well, the bus is filled with the smell of propane. He said it's really heavy and it's really bad. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So that was not good. I don't have that defense mechanism to be able to protect myself from gases and things like that. So I was like, ooh, kind of, pretty nervous. So there were 3 red flags with the with the fire pit, with the highway right there, and then with the bus filling with propane. And then he pointed out, he said, I don't know if you noticed, but there's no lock on the inside of this door. I'm like, no lock? Okay, that's weird. And he said, but I think the final straw is the fact that there is a lock on the door. I was like, wait a second, what? And he goes, there's a lock on the outside of the door only. So we could easily be locked in and have no way out. Like, we would literally have to like tear through one of those critter holes in order to crawl out of that thing if somebody were to lock us in. And the area was kind of like a homeless person's dream because there was so much trash and stuff everywhere. And it was like, maybe this is not the best idea to stay here. And so we were like, okay, I think this is over the line. So we were going to leave. And we got in the car, and I texted our host, and I was like, something came up. I didn't want to be rude. I didn't want to be mean. I was just like, so I just kind of bowed out gracefully and kind. And they were so nice that I just, I couldn't be mean to him about it. And I'm sure somebody else would have probably really enjoyed that bus, but no, not for me. So we drove back up, and it was so cold. Like, we threw our hoodies on. I'm like pulling it tight and like just trying to stay warm while the car is heating up. And we're sitting at the top looking down at all of those other campsites right by the rock pile. And this car comes around, and they kind of squeeze past us. Like, I'm not real sure how they were able to really get their vehicle past us, but there wasn't really much choice. Like, they had to. And they kind of pulled in next to us, and I looked over just naturally, and I laughed to myself because the woman in the passenger seat, her eyes were like as big as saucers. They were like, whoa! And she smacks the driver in the arm. Like, I don't know if it was her husband or boyfriend or whatever, but she like smacks him in the arm and then points at our freezer in the back of our truck while we're sitting there with those hoodies on our phones, looking at all the creepy campsites in this construction dump pile. And he stepped on the gas and took off down the hill. And he parked at, I guess, was their bus that they were going to be staying at. And they sat there, and they did not get out. And we had the hardest time finding a place from there because, like, there was nothing around. And it took us like 20 minutes to find a place to stay. And the whole time we were sitting there, that whole 20 minutes, those people did not get out of their vehicle. They did not check anything out. They did not step out. They just sat there like looking at our vehicle the whole time. So I'm cracking up thinking, okay, she's probably saying exactly what I said about watching way too much true crime. And we decided to just go ahead and leave because we didn't want to freak them out any longer than we already had. And eventually I found a place, a cute little like tiny house / campsite. So we knew we would have heat. We knew we would have a shower. And it was it was perfect. It was the perfect romantic setting from there. We had an open flame dinner, campfire dinner, whiskey. It was perfect. And we had a great story to tell. So tell me, my loves, what would you have done in our situation? Would you have stayed and would you have braved it and totally checked it out? Or would you have left? I mean, that shower was pretty massive. I mean, it could wash away a lot of evidence. So I'd love to know what you think. What would you have done if you were that other couple and you saw our freezer in the back of our truck? Would you have stayed? Would you have left? I can't wait to hear what you have to say. So please comment down below, like and subscribe for future stories. I will see you next week and have a good night.